Catherine Williams had always believed that life's most beautiful moments happened when people least expected them. At 78 years old, she had witnessed enough joy and sorrow to understand that both were necessary threads in the fabric of human existence. Her weathered hands, marked by age spots and gentle wrinkles, told stories of decades spent creating art, raising children, and touching the lives of everyone who crossed her path. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of her small art studio, casting golden rays across canvases that lined every available wall space. Some paintings were complete masterpieces that captured the essence of ordinary moments, while others remained half-finished, waiting patiently for inspiration to strike again. Catherine sat in her favorite wooden chair, the same one her late husband Robert had built for her 40 years ago, contemplating the blank canvas that stood before her on the easel. She had been feeling unusually tired lately, though she attributed it to the natural process of aging. Her doctor had mentioned some concerning test results during her last visit, but Catherine had chosen to focus on what truly mattered to her, creating one final piece that would encapsulate everything she had learned about life, love, and the human spirit. This painting would be different from all the others. It would be her legacy, her final gift to the world. The idea had come to her in a dream 3 weeks earlier. She had seen herself painting with extraordinary clarity and purpose, her brush moving across the canvas with movements that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. In the dream, people gathered around her completed work, their faces filled with wonder and understanding. When she woke, Catherine knew exactly what she needed to paint, though she couldn't explain why the vision felt so important. Her daughter Sarah visited every Tuesday, bringing groceries and staying for tea. Sarah was a practical woman who worked as a nurse at the local hospital, and she had been expressing growing concern about her mother's health. Catherine could see the worry lines deepening around Sarah's eyes during each visit, but she also noticed how her daughter's expression softened whenever she looked at the paintings that decorated Catherine's home. "Mom, you really should consider moving to that assisted living community downtown," Sarah had said during her last visit, her voice gentle but persistent. "The one with the nice gardens and the art room. You could still paint, but you'd have help when you need it." Catherine had smiled and patted her daughter's hand, understanding the love behind the suggestion while knowing in her heart that she needed to stay exactly where she was. This studio, this home, held too many memories and too much creative energy for her to abandon now. Besides, she had work to finish. The neighbors on Maple Street had grown accustomed to seeing Catherine in her garden each morning, tending to the flowers that Robert had planted years before his passing. Mrs. Henderson from next door often stopped by with fresh cookies or just to chat about the weather, while young Tommy from across the street would wave enthusiastically whenever he saw her. These simple interactions filled Catherine's days with warmth and reminded her that human connections were among life's greatest treasures. Catherine's arthritis had been making it more difficult to hold her paintbrush for extended periods, but she had developed techniques to work around the discomfort. She would paint in shorter sessions, taking breaks to rest her hands while studying her progress from different angles. The process had become more meditative, forcing her to consider each brushstroke carefully rather than rushing toward completion. The painting she envisioned would incorporate elements from her entire life journey. She planned to include the old oak tree from her childhood home, where she had first discovered her love for art by sketching its changing appearance through the seasons. There would be faces of people who had shaped her understanding of compassion and resilience, though she would paint them in a way that captured their essence rather than their exact features. Most importantly, the painting would convey a sense of hope and continuity, showing how love and beauty persist even as individual lives come to an end. Her art supplies were organized exactly as they had been for decades. Tubes of paint arranged by color temperature, brushes sorted by size and purpose, and jars filled with water and cleaning solutions. Catherine found comfort in these familiar routines, the same movements she had repeated thousands of times throughout her artistic career. Each tool felt like an extension of her own body, responsive to her intentions, and capable of translating her emotions into visible form. The morning she began her final painting, Catherine felt an unusual surge of energy and clarity. Her hands seemed steadier than they had been in months, and colors appeared more vivid than usual. She started with broad background washes, establishing the foundational mood and atmosphere that would support all the details to come. As she worked, memories flooded back with surprising intensity, as if her subconscious mind was offering up every significant moment for potential inclusion in this culminating work. She remembered the day she had met Robert at an art exhibition downtown. He had been standing in front of one of her paintings for an unusually long time, his expression thoughtful and appreciative. When she finally approached him to ask what he found so interesting about the piece, he had turned to her with the kindest smile she had ever seen and said, "It makes me feel like I'm not alone in the world." That conversation had led to coffee, which had led to dinner, which had eventually led to 52 years of marriage filled with laughter, creativity, and mutual support. The painting began to take shape slowly, each session revealing new layers of meaning and visual complexity. Catherine found herself working with a patience and attention to detail that surprised even her. She would spend entire mornings on a small section of sky, adjusting the color temperature until it perfectly matched the emotional tone she was seeking. Other days, she would focus on a single face, working to capture not just physical features, but the inner light that made each person unique. Her neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, noticed that Catherine seemed different lately, more focused and purposeful in her daily activities. During their conversations over the garden fence, Catherine spoke about her painting project with an intensity that was both inspiring and slightly concerning. There was something in her voice that suggested this work was more than just another artistic endeavor, though she couldn't quite identify what made it feel so significant. As autumn approached, the changing light in Catherine's studio began to influence her color choices. The warm, golden quality of October sunshine seemed perfect for the mood she was trying to create, and she adjusted her painting schedule to take advantage of the most beautiful light each day. She would rise early, prepare a simple breakfast, and then spend hours in focused concentration, completely absorbed in the process of creation. The physical demands of painting for extended periods were taking their toll, but Catherine felt driven to continue. She had developed a routine of gentle stretching exercises to help manage her arthritis, and she made sure to eat regular meals and stay hydrated throughout her working sessions. Her body might be aging, but her artistic vision remained as sharp and compelling as ever. During quiet evening hours, Catherine would sit beside her easel and simply look at her work in progress, planning the next day's efforts and considering how each element contributed to the overall composition. These moments of reflection were as important as the actual painting time, allowing her subconscious mind to process and refine her artistic intentions. She felt as if she was in dialogue with the painting itself, responding to its needs and allowing it to guide her toward its own completion. The first major breakthrough came when she successfully painted the central figure of her composition. She had been struggling for days to capture the expression she wanted, something that conveyed both deep wisdom and childlike wonder. Then, during a particularly inspired morning session, everything clicked into place. The face emerged from the canvas with a life of its own, seeming to gaze back at Catherine with understanding and approval. From that moment forward, the painting seemed to paint itself. Catherine's hands moved with confidence and precision, adding details and refining relationships between different elements with an ease that felt almost supernatural. She began to understand why the dream had felt so significant. She was creating something that transcended her individual artistic ability, something that seemed to channel collective human experience into visible form. Word began to spread through the neighborhood about Catherine's extraordinary project, though she had said very little about it to anyone. Sarah noticed a change in her mother's demeanor during their weekly visits, a sense of peaceful determination that was both beautiful and slightly mysterious. When Sarah asked to see the painting, Catherine would smile and say it wasn't ready yet, but her eyes held a sparkle that suggested something remarkable was taking shape in the little studio. The autumn weeks passed quickly as Catherine worked with increasing intensity and focus. She had never felt so connected to her artistic process, so completely absorbed in the act of creation. Each day brought new discoveries and insights, both about her painting and about herself. She began to understand that this final work was not just a painting, but a kind of meditation on life itself, a visual prayer that expressed everything she had learned about love, loss, beauty, and hope. As November arrived and the first frost touched her garden, Catherine realized that her painting was nearing completion. The thought filled her with both satisfaction and a strange sadness, as if finishing this work would also mean finishing something much larger and more significant. She began to pay even closer attention to each remaining detail, wanting to ensure that every element was exactly as it needed to be before she set down her brush for the final time. #Catherine's story. The creation the November morning when Catherine added the final touches to her painting arrived with an unusual stillness in the air. She had awakened before dawn, feeling a profound sense of purpose that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her soul. As she prepared her morning tea and arranged her painting supplies, every movement felt deliberate and meaningful, as if she were participating in a sacred ritual that had been planned long before her conscious mind could understand its significance. The painting had evolved far beyond her original vision, becoming something that seemed to breathe with its own life force. What had begun as a simple composition had transformed into a complex tapestry of human experience that somehow managed to tell multiple stories simultaneously. The central figure, whose face had given her so much trouble in the early stages, now gazed out from the canvas with an expression of such profound compassion that Catherine sometimes felt as if she were being watched by an old friend. Sarah had been visiting more frequently as the painting neared completion, though Catherine suspected her daughter's increased attention was motivated by more than just curiosity about the artwork. During their conversations, Sarah would study her mother's face carefully, as if searching for signs of something she couldn't quite name. Catherine understood her daughter's concern and felt grateful for the love it represented, but she also felt an unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The painting had begun to attract attention from other sources as well. Mrs. Henderson had mentioned Catherine's project to her own daughter during a phone call, describing the extraordinary sense of peace and purpose that seemed to surround the elderly artist whenever she discussed her work. Word spread through their social circles, and soon Catherine found herself receiving unexpected visits from acquaintances who claimed to be just stopping by but whose eyes inevitably drifted toward the studio door with barely concealed curiosity. Despite the growing interest in her project, Catherine maintained strict boundaries around her working time. She had learned decades ago that artistic creation required protection from external pressures and expectations. Each morning, she would enter her studio and close the door gently but firmly, creating a sacred space where her creative spirit could operate without interference. During these protected hours, time seemed to move differently, and Catherine often emerged to discover that entire afternoons had passed without her awareness. The physical challenges of painting had intensified as the work progressed, but Catherine had discovered reserves of strength and endurance that surprised her. On days when her arthritis was particularly troublesome, she would adjust her technique, using broader brushstrokes and focusing on areas of the painting that required less fine detail. These adaptive strategies had actually enhanced certain aspects of the work, giving it a loose, expressive quality that conventional precision might have inhibited. Dr. Martinez, Catherine's physician, had called twice to schedule follow-up appointments regarding her recent test results, but Catherine had politely postponed each meeting until after her painting was complete. She understood the concern behind these calls and appreciated the doctor's diligence, but she also knew that some things were more important than medical protocols. This painting needed to be finished, and she needed to be the one to finish it. The neighborhood children had begun stopping by her garden fence on their way to and from school, drawn by something they couldn't articulate about the elderly woman who painted in the little house with the bright blue shutters. Catherine would wave to them from her studio window, and sometimes she would take short breaks to chat with the more talkative ones about their school projects and weekend plans. These brief interactions filled her with joy and reminded her that art was ultimately about connection between human souls. As the painting entered its final phase, Catherine found herself working with an intensity and focus that felt almost otherworldly. Her brushstrokes became increasingly confident and purposeful, as if her hands were being guided by some force beyond her conscious control. Colors seemed to blend and harmonize on the canvas in ways that surprised even her experienced eye, creating effects that she had never quite achieved in previous works. The composition had evolved to include symbolic elements that seemed to emerge from the painting process itself, rather than from conscious planning. A subtle spiral pattern appeared in the background, suggesting both the cyclical nature of life and the infinite expansion of love and understanding. Small details that she didn't remember adding would appear overnight, as if the painting were completing itself during the hours when she wasn't actively working on it. Thomas, the mail carrier who had been delivering to Maple Street for 15 years, noticed changes in Catherine's daily routine as her painting project intensified. She no longer spent long periods in her garden, and her usual morning walks had become shorter and less frequent. However, when he caught glimpses of her through the studio window, she appeared more vibrant and focused than he had seen her in years. There was something about her posture and the quality of her attention that suggested deep satisfaction and fulfillment. The painting's emotional impact on Catherine herself had been growing stronger as it neared completion. Sometimes, while working on a particular section, she would find herself moved to tears by the beauty and significance of what was emerging under her brush. These weren't tears of sadness, but rather of overwhelming gratitude for the privilege of participating in something so meaningful and transformative. She felt as if she were not just creating art, but channeling universal truths about the human experience. Local artist David Chun, who had been a friend of Catherine's for over 20 years, stopped by unexpectedly one afternoon and asked if he could see her latest work. Catherine hesitated, knowing that she rarely showed unfinished paintings to anyone, but something in David's manner convinced her to make an exception. When she led him to her studio and revealed the canvas, his reaction was immediate and profound. He stood in complete silence for several minutes, his expression cycling through surprise, recognition, and what appeared to be deep reverence. "Catherine," David finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this is unlike anything you've ever created. There's something happening here that goes beyond technique or artistic skill. This painting has a presence, a kind of spiritual energy that I've only seen in the greatest works of art." His response confirmed what Catherine had been sensing throughout the creation process. This painting was different, special in ways that couldn't be explained through conventional artistic analysis. It seemed to exist at the intersection of personal expression and universal truth, speaking simultaneously to individual experience and collective human understanding. The weather during the final weeks of November was unusually mild, allowing Catherine to keep her studio windows open for extended periods. The gentle breeze that flowed through the room seemed to carry with it inspiration and energy that enhanced her creative process. She would often pause in her painting to appreciate the way natural light played across the canvas, revealing subtle color relationships and textural effects that she hadn't noticed under artificial illumination. Sarah began bringing her own children to visit their grandmother more frequently, though she usually kept these visits brief to avoid interrupting Catherine's work schedule. The grandchildren, aged 8 and 12, were fascinated by the painting process and would watch their grandmother work with the kind of quiet attention usually reserved for magic shows or special ceremonies. Their presence filled Catherine with warmth and reminded her that art was ultimately about passing wisdom and beauty from one generation to the next. The painting's subject matter had evolved to include representations of all the people who had shaped Catherine's understanding of love and resilience. Robert appeared not as a literal portrait, but as a quality of gentle strength that permeated the entire composition. Her children were present as symbols of growth and continuity, while friends and neighbors contributed their own unique energies to the overall harmony of the work. The result was a visual symphony that celebrated the interconnectedness of human relationships. As December approached, Catherine realized that her painting was nearly complete. The thought filled her with a complex mixture of satisfaction, anticipation, and a strange sense of impending change that she couldn't quite identify. She began to work with even greater care and attention to detail, wanting to ensure that every element was perfectly balanced and that the overall composition achieved the exact emotional tone she had been seeking since that first inspirational dream. The final painting session arrived with the kind of crisp December morning that made every breath feel like a gift. Catherine prepared her usual tea and spent extra time arranging her workspace, knowing somehow that this would be the last time she would sit before this particular canvas as an artist at work. She picked up her smallest brush and approached the easel with a heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment. The last brushstrokes seemed to paint themselves, guided by an artistic instinct that had been refined over decades of creative practice. As Catherine stepped back to view the completed work, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace that transcended anything she had experienced in her long artistic career. The painting was finished, and it was everything she had hoped it would be, a testament to the beauty and meaning that could be found in every human life, a visual prayer that spoke directly to the heart of anyone who would take the time to truly see it. Hashtag Catherine's story. The revelation the morning Catherine completed her final painting marked the beginning of something she hadn't anticipated. As she set down her brush for the last time and stepped back to admire the finished work, a profound sense of completion washed over her that extended far beyond artistic satisfaction. The painting seemed to glow with its own inner light, as if every brushstroke had been charged with the accumulated wisdom and love of her 78 years of living. She spent the entire day simply sitting with her creation, studying it from different angles and in changing light conditions. As the December sun moved across the sky, the painting revealed new depths and subtleties that she hadn't noticed during the creation process. Colors seemed to shift and breathe, faces emerged and reseated in the complex layering of paint, and the overall composition pulsed with a life that felt almost independent of her artistic intentions. Sarah arrived for her weekly visit that Tuesday afternoon and immediately sensed that something significant had occurred. Catherine's face held a serene expression that her daughter had never seen before, a kind of peaceful radiance that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than physical health or temporary happiness. When Catherine announced that the painting was finished, Sarah felt both excitement and an inexplicable sense of apprehension. "May I see it now, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle but insistent. "You've been working on it for so long, and everyone has been curious about what you've been creating with such dedication." Catherine nodded slowly, understanding that the time for privacy and protection was over. Her painting was ready to meet the world, and she was ready to share what she had discovered during those months of intensive creative work. She led her daughter to the studio door, paused for a moment to prepare herself for Sarah's reaction, and then opened the door to reveal the completed masterpiece. Sarah's response was immediate and overwhelming. She gasped audibly and took an involuntary step backward, her hand rising to cover her mouth as tears began to form in her eyes. For several minutes, she stood in complete silence, studying the painting with an intensity that matched her mother's own artistic focus. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion and wonder. "Mom, this is extraordinary. I don't understand how you created something so powerful and moving. It's like looking into the heart of everything that matters in life. I feel like I can see myself in it, and dad, and the kids, and even people I've never met but somehow recognize. Catherine smiled, feeling a deep satisfaction at her daughter's recognition of what she had tried to accomplish. The painting had indeed captured something universal, something that transcended individual experience while simultaneously honoring the uniqueness of each human story. She had succeeded in creating a visual language that spoke directly to the soul, bypassing intellectual analysis to communicate on the level of pure emotion and spiritual understanding. Word of the completed painting spread quickly through the neighborhood, carried by the kind of organic communication network that exists in close-knit communities. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it to her book club, David Chun called several artist friends, and even the postal worker Thomas found himself describing the mysterious project to his wife over dinner. Within a few days, Catherine began receiving requests from people who wanted to see the work for themselves. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by the attention, Catherine experienced a profound sense of rightness about sharing her creation. She understood intuitively that this painting was never meant to be kept hidden or private. Its purpose was to touch lives and open hearts, to serve as a reminder of the beauty and meaning that existed within every human experience. She began welcoming visitors to her studio with the same gracious hospitality she had always shown to neighbors and friends. Each person who viewed the painting had a unique and powerful response. Some visitors stood in contemplative silence, while others wept openly or shared personal stories that the artwork seemed to evoke. A young mother brought her elderly father, who had been struggling with depression since his wife's death, and watched in amazement as he smiled genuinely for the first time in months while gazing at Catherine's creation. Dr. Martinez finally managed to schedule a house call when Catherine failed to appear for her rescheduled appointment. He arrived at her home prepared to deliver test results that would require difficult conversations about treatment options and lifestyle changes. However, when he saw Catherine in her natural environment, surrounded by the evidence of her creative achievement and radiating a kind of peaceful vitality that contradicted his medical expectations, he found himself questioning the urgency of his clinical concerns. The painting affected Dr. Martinez as profoundly as it had everyone else who encountered it. As a medical professional, he was trained to focus on symptoms and diagnoses, but standing in Catherine's studio, he found himself thinking about healing in much broader terms. The artwork seemed to address aspects of human wellness that couldn't be measured through laboratory tests or treated with conventional medications. "Catherine," he said after spending 20 minutes studying the painting in thoughtful silence, "I came here to discuss your test results and recommend some aggressive treatment protocols. But looking at you now, seeing what you've accomplished and the peace you've found, I'm wondering if we need to reconsider what health and healing really mean." Catherine listened carefully as Dr. Martinez explained her medical situation with compassionate honesty. The news wasn't surprising. She had sensed for months that her body was beginning its final transition. However, instead of fear or despair, she felt a profound gratitude for the time she had been given to complete her artistic mission. The painting represented everything she wanted to leave behind as her legacy, a tangible expression of love that would continue touching lives long after her physical presence was gone. The conversation with Dr. Martinez marked a turning point in Catherine's relationship with her own mortality. Rather than viewing her declining health as a tragedy to be fought or denied, she began to see it as a natural progression that gave her remaining time additional meaning and poignancy. Each day became more precious, each interaction more significant, each moment of beauty more worthy of careful attention and gratitude. News of Catherine's situation and her remarkable painting began to attract attention from beyond the immediate neighborhood. Local artist David Chun contacted a gallery owner downtown who specialized in works by mature artists. Elena Rodriguez, the gallery director, agreed to make a private visit to Catherine's studio, expecting to see the competent work of an elderly amateur, but hoping to offer some encouragement and professional feedback. Elena's reaction to Catherine's painting exceeded even the most enthusiastic descriptions she had received. As someone who had spent decades evaluating and exhibiting artwork, she recognized immediately that she was in the presence of something truly exceptional. The technical skill was impressive, but the emotional and spiritual impact of the work transcended conventional artistic categories. Catherine, Elena said, her professional composure giving way to genuine excitement. This painting belongs in a museum. I've never seen anything quite like it. There's a quality here that reminds me of the great spiritual artists throughout history, but with a contemporary accessibility that makes it speak directly to modern audiences. The gallery director proposed organizing an exhibition that would center around Catherine's masterpiece, while including other works from her artistic career. The idea of a retrospective exhibition both thrilled and intimidated Catherine. She had never sought fame or critical recognition for her art, preferring the quiet satisfaction of creating beauty for its own sake. However, she understood that this opportunity might allow her final painting to reach people who needed its message of hope and connection. As plans for the exhibition took shape, Catherine found herself reflecting on the unexpected trajectory of her final months. What had begun as a private creative project had evolved into something that seemed to serve a purpose much larger than personal artistic expression. The painting had become a catalyst for conversations about life, death, love, and the meanings people discovered in their daily experiences. The neighborhood around Maple Street had been transformed by the presence of Catherine's painting and the steady stream of visitors it attracted. People who had lived as strangers for years began talking with each other about the artwork and sharing their own stories of loss, hope, and resilience. The painting seemed to create a kind of emotional common ground where human connections could flourish across traditional boundaries of age, background, and circumstance. Catherine's grandchildren became frequent visitors during this period, drawn not just by their grandmother's declining health, but by their fascination with the painting's effect on everyone who encountered it. 8-year-old Emma would sit quietly in the studio for long periods, studying the canvas with the kind of complete attention that adults often lost in their daily routines. 12-year-old Michael began bringing his sketchbook during visits, attempting to capture some essence of what made his grandmother's painting so special. The children's responses to the artwork provided Catherine with some of her deepest satisfaction. Their ability to connect with the painting's emotional content without needing intellectual explanations confirmed her belief that true art speaks a universal language that transcends age and education. Watching Emma and Michael discover their own artistic voices in response to her work gave Catherine confidence that the creative spirit would continue flowing through future generations. As December deepened and the exhibition planning accelerated, Catherine experienced a remarkable resurgence of energy and clarity. Friends and family members noticed that she seemed more vibrant and present than she had been in years, as if the approaching culmination of her life's work was providing a kind of temporary reprieve from physical decline. She used this gift of additional vitality to prepare carefully for what she sensed would be her final public appearance as an artist. The painting itself seemed to continue evolving even though Catherine had set down her brush permanently. Different visitors discovered new details and meanings that hadn't been apparent to previous observers, as if the artwork was revealing itself gradually according to each viewer's capacity for understanding. Catherine began to realize that her role as the creator of the piece was just the beginning of its true life as a source of inspiration and connection for others. During quiet evening hours, Catherine would sit beside her completed masterpiece and feel a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this point. The painting represented not just her final artistic achievement, but a kind of spiritual autobiography that captured the essence of everything she had learned about love, loss, beauty, and the resilience of the human spirit. Soon, it would begin its own journey into the world, carrying her message of hope and connection to people she would never meet, but whose lives might be touched by what she had created. #Catherine's Story. The legacy the morning of the gallery exhibition arrived with the kind of crystalline winter light that transforms ordinary moments into something magical. Catherine awoke feeling surprisingly strong and clear-minded, as if her body had marshaled all its remaining resources for this culminating event. She dressed carefully in her favorite blue dress, the one Robert had always said brought out the color of her eyes, and spent extra time arranging her silver hair in the simple style she had worn for decades. Elena Rodriguez arrived early to accompany Catherine to the gallery, bringing with her a small team of assistants and a wheelchair that Catherine politely but firmly declined. The elderly artist insisted on walking into her own exhibition, understanding instinctively that this moment required her to appear as strong and dignified as possible. The short journey through downtown streets she had known for most of her life felt like a pilgrimage, each familiar building and landmark taking on heightened significance. The Meridian Gallery had been transformed for Catherine's exhibition. Her final masterpiece occupied the central wall, illuminated by carefully positioned lights that seemed to make the painting breathe with inner luminescence. Surrounding it were 30 smaller works spanning her entire artistic career, creating a visual narrative of her development as an artist and a human being. The overall effect was both intimate and grand, celebrating not just artistic achievement, but a life lived with purpose and compassion. Conversations developed spontaneously among strangers, united by their shared response to what they were experiencing. Catherine positioned herself near her masterpiece and welcomed each visitor personally, sharing stories about the painting's creation and listening carefully to their reactions and interpretations. She discovered that people saw different elements and meanings in the work depending on their own life experiences and emotional needs. A young couple planning their wedding found hope and celebration in the swirling colors, while an elderly man recently widowed discovered comfort in the painting's serene acceptance of life's natural cycles. Sarah and her children arrived early, followed by most of Catherine's neighbors from Maple Street. Mrs. Henderson wore her best dress and had brought her entire extended family, including grandchildren who had driven from 3 states away for the occasion. David Chun came with a group of fellow artists who stood before Catherine's painting in respectful silence, recognizing the presence of something that transcended technical skill or artistic training. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors who had learned about the exhibition through social media posts and local news coverage. A group of art students from the university studied Catherine's work with intense academic interest, taking notes and sketching details while discussing technique and symbolism in hushed voices. Their enthusiasm reminded Catherine of her own artistic education decades earlier, when every museum visit and gallery opening had felt like a doorway to new possibilities. Dr. Martinez attended the exhibition with his wife and teenage daughter, grateful for the opportunity to see Catherine in this context of celebration and achievement rather than medical decline. Watching her interact with admirers and explain her artistic process, he gained a deeper understanding of what health and vitality could mean beyond conventional medical definitions. Catherine was clearly unwell in ways that would show up on laboratory tests, but she was also radiantly alive in ways that no medical instrument could measure. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine began to tire, but she maintained her gracious presence and continued engaging with visitors who sought her out for conversation. Each interaction felt significant to her, as if she were passing along not just information about her painting, but something more essential about finding meaning and beauty in ordinary existence. She understood intuitively that this exhibition was serving purposes beyond artistic display. It was creating a community of people connected by shared recognition of life's deeper values. A local television news crew arrived to film a segment about the exhibition, focusing on the unusual story of an elderly artist creating her masterpiece while facing serious health challenges. Catherine agreed to a brief interview, using the opportunity to talk about the importance of creativity and human connection rather than dwelling on her personal circumstances. Her words carried a quiet authority that came from decades of living thoughtfully and deliberately. Young Tommy from across the street attended with his parents, wearing his best clothes and carrying a small bouquet of flowers from his mother's garden. He presented the flowers to Catherine with serious ceremony, telling her that her painting made him feel like everything was going to be okay. His innocent sincerity moved Catherine to tears and reminded everyone present that art's greatest power lies in its ability to communicate hope and comfort across all barriers of age and experience. The painting continued to affect viewers in profound and unexpected ways throughout the day. A middle-aged woman who had been struggling with grief after her father's death found herself sobbing quietly in front of the canvas, experiencing a kind of emotional release she hadn't been able to access through months of counseling. A teenager dealing with anxiety about his future discovered a sense of peace and possibility in the work's balanced composition and harmonious colors. Elena Rodriguez moved through the exhibition space with growing excitement, recognizing that she was witnessing something unprecedented in her gallery career. The quality of attention and emotional engagement she observed among visitors went far beyond typical gallery responses. People were spending extended time with Catherine's painting, returning to it repeatedly throughout their visit, and leaving only reluctantly when other commitments required their departure. As evening approached and the formal exhibition hours drew to a close, a crowd of about 50 people remained in the gallery, reluctant to end their connection with Catherine's work. The artist herself had been seated in a comfortable chair near her masterpiece for the past hour, conserving her energy while continuing to greet visitors and answer questions about her creative process. Catherine's final remarks to the gathered crowd were brief but deeply moving. She spoke about the painting as a gift that she was happy to share with the world, a visual reminder that every human life contains infinite possibilities for love, growth, and meaningful contribution. She thanked everyone for their presence and their willingness to open their hearts to what her artwork was trying to communicate. The journey home felt like a gentle transition from one chapter of existence to another. Catherine sat quietly in the passenger seat of Elena's car, watching familiar streets pass by while reflecting on the extraordinary day. The exhibition had exceeded every expectation, not just in terms of attendance and response, but in its demonstration of art's power to create genuine human connection and understanding. Back in her own home, surrounded by family members and close friends who had gathered to extend the celebration, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion and satisfaction. Her final painting was now beginning its own independent life in the world, touching hearts and opening minds in ways that would continue long after her personal involvement had ended. The work would speak for itself, carrying her message of hope and love to people she would never meet, but who might find comfort and inspiration in what she had created. The following weeks brought a stream of visitors to Catherine's home, people who had seen the painting at the exhibition and wanted to express their gratitude for its impact on their lives. She received letters from strangers describing how the artwork had helped them through difficult periods or inspired them to pursue their own creative dreams. Each message confirmed her belief that true art serves purposes beyond personal expression, acting as a bridge between individual experience and universal human understanding. Catherine's health declined gradually, but peacefully in the months following the exhibition. She spent her remaining time surrounded by family and friends, sharing stories and wisdom while continuing to receive visitors who wanted to talk about her painting and its ongoing influence in their lives. The artwork itself had been purchased by the city's art museum, ensuring that it would remain accessible to future generations of viewers. The final masterpiece became a pilgrimage destination for people seeking inspiration and comfort. Museum visitors would often spend extended time in front of the painting, finding in its complex layers of meaning and emotion whatever they most needed for their own life circumstances. Children would point out faces and details that adults missed, while elderly viewers discovered reflections of their own experiences in the work's celebration of human resilience and love. Catherine's legacy extended far beyond the painting itself. The exhibition and its aftermath had created a network of people connected by shared appreciation for art's power to illuminate what matters most in human existence. Many visitors were inspired to pursue their own creative projects or to approach their daily lives with greater attention to beauty and meaning. When Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep 6 months after the exhibition, her funeral drew hundreds of people who had been touched by her final artistic gift. The service became a celebration not just of her life, but of the enduring power of creativity to transcend individual mortality and continue touching lives across generations. The painting continues to hang in the museum's main gallery, where it draws visitors from around the world who have heard about its remarkable ability to speak directly to human hearts. Museum guides report that people often return multiple times to view the work, discovering new elements and meanings with each encounter. The artwork has become a focal point for discussions about art's role in helping people navigate life's challenges and find deeper purpose in their daily experiences. Catherine's final portrait leaves everyone who encounters it with a sense of having glimpsed something essential about the human condition. It serves as a visual reminder that every life contains infinite possibilities for love, creativity, and meaningful connection with others. The painting stands as her ultimate achievement, a masterpiece that transcends individual artistic accomplishment to become a lasting testament to the beauty and resilience of the human spirit.